So hi everyone and welcome to Oceanside Chat, our signature interview series spotlighting personal stories and timeless wisdom in leadership, innovation, technology, and entrepreneurship. These are real conversations with real people and shared to inspire across generation. And today, I'm thrilled to welcome Bartel, Senior Vice President and Chief Procurement Officer at American Airlines. With nearly 30 years of global leadership in procurement and supply chain, Dan has driven multi-billion-dollar transformations at ABB, Schneider Electric, and now American Airlines, earning recognition as the 2023 CPO of the Year. But what truly makes Dan stand out is how he leads with emotional intelligence, a strong sense of purpose, and a focus on building high-performing, resilient teams. In this conversation, we will explore how EQ shapes leadership in complex environments, from high-stake decision to culture transformation. So Dan, welcome to our class, and thank you so much for joining us.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Do you want to say hi to our audience?
Hello.
Okay. I just read briefly your bio, but I'm wondering in your own words, who is Dan Bartel? And what's the heart of what you do? We just had this morning discuss about personal intelligence and self-awareness. So I'm really curious about how you introduce yourself.
Yeah, so there's a personal side and a professional side, I would say. So I'm a chief procurement officer, right? At work. At home, my wife is the chief procurement officer. I'm in charge of only revenue. She does the expense side of the equation. Maybe talk personally first. I'm from Wisconsin originally. That's where I was born and raised, went to undergraduate school, studied supply chain management there. Since then, I left in 2002 and have lived in 4 different states and 5 different countries. So I would say I'm definitely a very transient person. I don't like to be in one place for too long. And I'm really curious. I love exploring the world. And was fortunate enough to find a wife with the same desires up until a certain point. And we can talk about that in a second too. But personally, I've got, my wife, 3 kids, an 8th grader, a freshman at USC actually, just up the road, and a junior at BU. Home for us is in Barcelona, Spain. My job is in Dallas, Texas, of course, because I work for American Airlines. So I've spent about 2/3 of my time in Dallas, 1/3 of my time back in Barcelona. Professionally, who am I? I'm a procurement guy. I'm absolutely a procurement guy through and through. And I'm a transformation person as well. So I'm someone who I love running into the burning building when there's a huge mess or set of problems. Again, gaps, right? Gaps are great. They're just opportunities to do better. And I love procurement because it's relatively straightforward and easy to see the result when you're doing a good job. Equally easy to see the results when you're not doing a good job. And in many companies, many industries, it's a substantial portion of the financial performance of the company. In American, 60% of our revenue goes out the door to suppliers. So if we can manage that just a little bit better than other airlines, we'll have an advantage from a cost perspective, right? That's the basics of it. Yeah, and I guess why, you said long form, so I'm just gonna keep going on and on as you stop me.
Okay.
Like, how did I get into this and why? And I think part of a really important part of being successful as a leader in industry is, and this is an important emotional intelligence lesson, is knowing yourself, right? You can't lead others really super effectively. You can't enable people to develop their careers unless you really understand yourself first, right? And why you are who you are and what made you who you are, right? So I also have an executive MBA degree from a school in Switzerland, and that was really focused heavily on leadership. And it taught me a lot about this, a lot about who I am and why I am who I am. And kind of taking it back to when I was a kid, I was really entrepreneurial as a kid, and this part I'm not really sure why. And I'm stood out in my family in that regard. Nobody else was like this. I got my first job when I was 12. I delivered newspapers, so something that no one does anymore, I don't think. But I was doing that for like a year, and then the kid next to me retired because he turned 14. So I took over his route, right, in the dead of winter because nobody else wanted. This is Wisconsin, right? It's freezing outside. There's a morning newspaper delivery. I had to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to do this job when I took over this other kid's route, right? Started a couple other businesses when I was in middle school and high school, just because, I don't know, I was really motivated to make money, and I don't really know why. I didn't do anything with it. I paid for my school, but it was just something that was inside of me. And I was obsessing with doing things really efficiently too, right? I was aiming and driving from a very young age, Jimmy. When I got into university, I started studying business because I really was motivated and really loved running businesses. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. I got a summer job when I was 18 in a small manufacturing company with just a handful of people that are out in the shop floor. So I had to do lots of different things. And again, lots of opportunities to optimize things. And I really got a flavor for supply chain management and material flow and all those kind of things. Went back to school for my second year, and I had to pick a major. And just my very practical mind, what I did was I looked at what are all the business majors, how many people graduated from those majors last year, and how many companies came on campus to recruit people from those majors. And there was one thing called production operations management, which basically in today's terms is supply chain. It had the least number of graduates and one of the most number of companies coming to recruit. I'm like, oh, I'll take that one. It's in high demand, and it was kind of similar to what I was doing in the past summer. Had a couple internships in college and caught on at a company called Rockwell in Milwaukee when I graduated, and went into planning initially. Hated it, just hated it. But 1 year later was recruited into the procurement team, and the rest is kind of history in terms of I stayed in procurement. I stayed in that same industry for 28 years, doing big transformations. There was a big one in Rockwell that I was just a small part of. I was really early in my career. I got lucky as well. That's an important part of success too, is having a little bit of luck. I took a chance. I left Rockwell after 7 years to go work for this company called Danaher. You guys know what Danaher is? Yeah. If I would have asked you that when I started working there in 2002, you would not have raised your hands. It was a $2 billion company. I think Larry Culp was in his second year as the CEO. The recruiter did a great job of selling it to me as a massive learning opportunity, and he was 100% correct. I learned a ton. It's kind of a meat grinder, though. I was starting to have kids, and it was hard on my personal life, frankly, working 70 hours a week, flying all over the world. So I decided to take a step back and take a different role at that stage of my life. But it was another transformation in another company. Eventually, I got a chance to be a CPO in a small company. And then I got lucky again. That small company was sold to a really big one, ABB, which at the time was a $40 billion revenue company. That after a few years, I eventually elevated to the CPO of that one. Again, really, really big procurement transformation, carried that forward to one of their competitors. Got tired of the industry a couple years ago, started looking around for something else, and found American Airlines, a company that hadn't had a central procurement function for more than a decade. So again, big opportunity to have a really big impact in an industry that's completely new. Like many of you, I obsess with continuously learning new things, and having been in the same industry for so long, I felt really hitting a ceiling in terms of my learning. So that changed entirely about 1.5 years ago when I came to American.
I have so many follow-up questions. I mean, first of all, love to talking to, learn about your journey, become a CPO and staying in a transformational role for so many years and different companies. But the question is really, you have a CPO at home, who is doing a better job?
Depends on the KPI.
What is the KPI?
So at home, our fights are about, she wants to do things on the cheap and I want them really high quality. So it's like the opposite of the conversations I have at work.
The next question you don't have to answer, but you talked about the 60% of airline industry, right? That cost needs to be managed. I'm just wondering about a P&L of your household. How many percent your wife is managing in terms of your income?
Yeah, I'm not answering that.
All right. Okay, we leave some privacy, so I don't want you to fight. I'm wondering. So since we talk about transformation, so what is transformational leadership? In your own words, what does that mean to you and why?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll put it in the context of what I do, because it's just how I think. When I transform procurement organizations, it doesn't start with procurement. It really starts with, what is the company trying to achieve, right? So what is this industry we're in? How do companies in this industry make money? What's important? What is the strategy of the company, right? Where are they going? Understanding that really, really in depth. I spent a lot of time on that. I really immersed myself when I first came to American, because here it is, this new industry that I don't understand. And I was shocked at how airlines actually make money. Hint, it's not by flying. Not at all. Not at all. But really understanding that in its as entirely as you can, and then really start to brainstorm, how can procurement, how can suppliers enable this, right? And we really come up with an exhaustive list of all the things that suppliers, procurement can do, whatever your function is, doesn't matter. I'm using procurement because that's my world. But how can you enable this strategy to come to life? And what you find, especially in procurement, because we work very cross-functionally, everybody in all the officers of my company, they all have budgets, they all spend money with outside suppliers, so I work with all of them, right? Same with my team. We're pervasive throughout the whole company. We have our fingers everywhere. So when things are like falling between the cracks, and I've got plenty of examples of that I can share as well if you're interested, but when something's falling between the cracks between functions, it's an opportunity for procurement to step in and fill the gap. So there's lots of things that you can identify that are opportunities to not just have an impact, but also set yourself apart and stand out as someone who's really going above and beyond, contributing value to the mission of the company, right? So understand the industry and the business, how to make money, understand the strategy of the company, make a big list of things, turn it into a plan, right? And align it with the leadership. Get everybody on board with where you're going and why. A good example in American, we did this, went through this process early last year, and one of the conclusions was, we're going to take the procurement KPIs and put them into the short-term bonus calculations. So now everybody in the company, which is all managers of people that are eligible for that bonus, want us to succeed. That's a great place to start. So here's something new that a company hasn't done before. It looks strange. Nobody understands it. Oh, but I get more money if it's successful. Okay, we'll help you succeed, right? So just another aspect of transformational leadership. But getting kind of that plan in place, getting it aligned, and then executing. Man, like I said before, don't screw it up, right? Then delivering, right? And being clear about what you need in order to deliver as well. And also, I would say being conservative on that. What you need in terms of resources, in terms of investment to deliver, and also sticking your neck out a bit. So again, in procurement, it's really easy to see how well you're doing. You can just look at the cost performance, for example, among other things. But I did that. I stuck my neck out a little bit and said, we're gonna the goal is this. We're gonna target quite a bit higher than that, and then we exceeded it, right? So then there's trust, and they just want to do more, and they want to invest more and get more out of the function. And it just kind of builds on itself.
So in your experience, what are the biggest challenges to make the transformation happen?
All of those things. It depends. The classic business school answer, it depends on the situation. But generally, where I've seen them not work is where there's not alignment, where there's not true alignment. I can call back the senior leaders of the business. So I can call back, and this is not the case at American. I have really good alignment there. But ABB is a really good example. Great company, excellent people. I really grew up in that company. Their core philosophy has been a really decentralized leadership, and we were centralizing procurement for the better part of a decade. We were pulling things. We were going counter to the basic leadership philosophy of the company, because we thought it was right and we were allowed to do it. Really, we weren't, and we were really pushing it. And throughout my time there, I noticed that like there were 3 different camps of stakeholders. 1/3 really supported us and were there with us in the transformation. 1/3 you kind of had to prove it to them first, and then they'd be on board well enough. And then 1/3 just constantly fighting against us, sometimes coming around, sometimes not. But you always had to look over your shoulder, right? So this is I would say one of the things that can really undermine you, and for me has been one of the biggest challenges of driving those transformations is getting everybody on the bus and pulling in the same direction.
Yeah, so I can anticipate all the challenges. Maybe the bigger the company is, the more challenges, for alignment, just proportionally size-wise. But given that challenge, what are some of the leadership traits, to become a good transformational leader?
So it's all the things I talked about earlier about really knowing yourself first and foremost, right?
How do you know yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question.
We just asked the question this morning, we reflected.
You
So I
take
love your answer.
Helen Wang's class on emotional intelligence. You will know yourself better at the end of that, I'm sure.
That's the right answer.
Seriously, it's part of the answer. You can't just do this by yourself. You need help. You absolutely need help. So I went through a whole process with this in business school as well. And we had called leadership teams, leadership groups, where people that we kind of tore each other down through a structured process, really understanding who each of us were. And we walked out of, we ended those sessions knowing each other and ourselves better than anyone else, right? I definitely have, I hope my wife doesn't watch this, but there are people that I went to school with that know me better than she does as a result of those conversations. I'm kind of convinced, to be honest. So that's, how you do it depends. I think having a coach as well is another really important aspect of that. So, knowing yourself, that's part of it. Knowing what you're feeling in different situations and why you're having those feelings. And feelings come from emotions. So emotions are triggered by your environment, right? Then you have feelings about those emotions, understanding where that stuff is coming from. And then once you understand that, you can start to control it. And when you can control it, then you can really start to influence other people quite a bit as well. You can read other people's feelings and emotions much better. And you can't control them, but you can influence them in different situations. And that's super powerful. And just some examples from my past. I used to be super intense and always switched on, always jumping in, always pushing my agenda forward, classic type A alpha. And always showing my emotion as well, right? Which I've learned over time is a terrible mistake and a big barrier to making progress. So I've since learned to really internalize things and be really calm. And I can tell you, like we faced some nasty crises in recent years, right? In supply chain with COVID. This last semiconductor crisis was just, for those of you in that industry or a customer of that industry, was just murderous. And a lot of very excited people around running businesses, putting a lot of pressure on people like us in procurement to do better. And being able to stay calm in those situations and genuinely calm. I'm not suppressing my emotions. I'm just figured out how to not get freaked out about things. Was a tremendous boost for me. It kept my team more calm, more focused, more steady. Just as one example.
Mm-hmm. So self-awareness, we started with like the traits for transformational leaders, right? That's one. Can you give us another one?
Self-awareness, being able to, again, I talked about controlling emotions and reading emotions of the room. I don't know where else to go with that one. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
You're stumping me already.
Very cool.
Early in the interview.
I know. I wonder, because in the transformational process, when you say the alignment with, everybody trying to bring them on board,
right?
I can anticipate another kind of challenge is you also started with like, what's the company goal? Strategically, where are we going, right? But there's also short-term and long-term goals. So how do you balance, in order to make that transformation happen, balance the short-term versus long-term goal?
Yeah. So I had a CFO tell me once that without the short term, there is no long term. And that is absolutely true. So the short term has to, you have to find a way through the short term or lead people through the short term. Again, conversation with Jimmy before about the tariffs, right? Everybody's freaking out about tariffs. There's a lot of very high impact short term problems, but everybody, all of our competitors, we're all facing the same high impact short term problems. So let's not lose our minds. Let's stay calm and navigate our way through those challenges.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to give like supply chain and what you did or you've been doing in the past just into context. So a couple of questions, just
Okay.
set the ground. How many people have you managed in the supply chain or procurement organization? Just give us maybe a range.
Well, my current team is only about 160. My team at Schneider was 1,500. That was the biggest one, probably. Well, ABB was close to 4,000. So yeah, a lot of people.
Geographically speaking.
Well, in American Airlines, one location, one address.
Oh,
Very
wow.
simple. Yes, that's a luxury, I can tell you. Schneider, we were in 250 factories in 55 countries. And there were probably about 8 hub locations where 80% of the people were located. But all over the world, yeah.
In terms of like organization structure, was like many tiers, a hierarchy or a flat, or is there
All those things.
all those things? Depends on which company and
Yeah, it depends on the organization setup of the company. Yep.
you also mentioned something I'm personally very interested in is in terms of centralized versus decentralized. So what do you think? Because procurement, right, itself it manages a huge amount of dollar amount.
Right. Yep.
So is that better, centralized, decentralized?
Yeah, there's no one answer to that, but I think most big multinational companies have gravitated towards at least some kind of a center-led organization setup, right? For the basic reasons of, okay, let's pool the spend and get economies of scale. From my experience, that's important, but what's more important is what I call economies of skill, right? So when you have, come back to the Schneider example, which was a centralized organization on paper, really, and in practice to some degree. But that supply chain was run on a regional basis. So there was a head of, North America, Europe, China, Southeast Asia, et cetera. Each of the big regions of the world had a head of supply chain that ran all the factories, distribution centers, right? And there was a procurement vice president that reported to me, supporting that person. But that procurement VP spent a lot more time with the regional supply chain head than with me, right? So how it really operated was more center-led, right? And what I learned is, again, there's certain categories, like coming back to semiconductors, very, very global in nature. Yeah, we're going to pool all our supply together, our demand together, and do one negotiation with each of those suppliers. It's a no-brainer, right? And we'll have one global person with a team that leads that. But where we found a lot more value is when somebody finds a good way of doing something, like, I don't know, aim and drive, this kind of cost management techniques. Yeah, exactly. We got a lot more value out of just copying and pasting those best practices around the world, whether in cost management and digital tools, training programs, you name it, right? If someone develops something awesome in a certain part of the world, we would very, very quickly replicate that in other places and create a lot more value than a negotiation can, say, just by pooling demand. Also, I've had situations where, like in ABB, we, when I was CPO there, we sold off the power grids business to Hitachi. It became Hitachi Energy ultimately, and that was basically 1/3 of the company being carved out after many years of consolidating all of the supply contracts into one set of agreements. So there was a really tough negotiation with the Japanese on, hey, we're going to lose all those procurement synergies when we carve those contracts out. So we had to jump through quite a few hoops, but we were able to prove that wouldn't happen. And it didn't happen. So I think we tend to overestimate the power of pooling demand.
So given you work in different industry, different company, geographically, I'm just curious about, what do you think? Is there a role that emotional intelligence play in supply chain or procurement?
Yeah, so let me
How
tell
do
you,
you describe that?
let me tell you a story. This might not answer your
love
question.
story.
I don't want to be a politician and not answer your question. So if I don't answer it, just tell me.
Okay.
But I used to think emotion has nothing to do with it. This is business, right? So it was early in my EMBA. I had a coach that was supposed to be coaching me on leadership, right? Supposed to be. She did a great job. But I had some meeting late in the day. It went really bad. It was an internal meeting. I was trying to make a change and everyone's disagreeing with me. It was kind of a fight, whatever. It was very frustrating. And then shortly after that, I had my call with my coach. So I got on the phone with her and I'm telling her about this meeting. And she said, well, how did that make you feel? And what I said to her is, well, I didn't feel anything. It was a meeting. Why would I have any feelings? And she's like, aha, idiot. This is the problem.
I didn't say that.
Are you angry about this meeting? I'm like, yeah, of course I'm angry about it. Okay, that's a feeling. You have feelings. So just the realization that this is happening and that people react to things because of how they feel is, to me, was life-changing, to be honest. Also in my personal life, you know?
Yeah. It's very interesting because we oftentimes, as a supply chain person, I mean, we negotiate a lot because, you know, there's a lot of terms and conditions. We have to decide how to do business together, this and that. So many of them are high-stake negotiation. When you just talk about emotion, I've been in many different kind of scenario. Curious about your experience. Like, how does emotional intelligence play a role in those high-stake negotiation and decision-making?
I mean, it plays a role in every human interaction, right? And I would say especially in situations like that where there's a lot on the line for both sides.
Do you think there's more emotion show there on the negotiation table helps or actually hurts?
It depends.
I know this is coming. What would you choose? In what situation you would like to show more emotion? In what situation you would like to be more rational? Or how do you balance between?
I mean, it really depends on the situation. If I think it will help my position in a negotiation, then I'll show a certain emotion. Sure.
How would you show that? I had a speaker in the past to throw out the shoes, you know, to the other side of the table.
I have never done that. That's a good one.
Yeah. What would you do? There are so many exciting things already happen and even more about to happen. So first of all, I think what's the best way to learn human skills, right? I don't anticipate that I could learn that from AI. I think the best way is really to learn from human. You know, we have a great example here that different generations come together.
Right.
I'm sure that, Sarai, I learn a lot, you know, from actually my daughter as well as your generation. So on a daily basis, and also my students. But vice versa, the students and the younger generation love to learn from us.
Yeah.
So I enjoy actually talking and interviewing and getting to the real stories behind the big ideas. So we have a lot of leaders, great leaders, coming to our platform, share their stories, authentic story, what they have learned, how they fail, you know, all the fun things that they have done, some of the advices for young people. And what I hope to do is also in the future that we get more younger generation, which, by the way, we have a new series coming starting, right, is called Purpose Why Medicine. So it's hosted by Irene, and which is much younger generation to, you know, for those of you that who might be interested in the medical field. I mean, is this the right field to go in, you know? And then what are some of the advice that the current physician is going to give it to you, some senior leader in that field. So I think all of those are like examples. But beyond this, what I said earlier about this interview series, we call the Oceanside Chat. So it's more about two people talking, you know, in a very casual way, but really telling the stories, right? And we are also launching a new series called Light Talks. Just to steal the idea a little bit from TED Talks, so you don't get confused. You know, what are TED Talks? Is
just
some of the some subject matter experts, right, coming out to share their knowledge and wisdom. So we have that series launching this year called Light Talks, and again focusing on those LITE, you know, elements. And I think in the pretty near future, we're thinking about doing some virtual meeting because, I mean, it's what a missed opportunity if we don't utilize technology to reach to a broader audience. So stay tuned for some soon, you know, community Zoom meeting, and we're going to invite some very interesting guest speakers and maybe subject matter expert to addressing a very hot topic that everybody might searching for answer.
Yeah, that sounds very exciting. And you mentioned a lot of new content coming up too.
Do you generally like show up as a calm negotiator
Yeah.
or more? Okay, all right. So then even more interesting. When
Yeah.
would you show?
It's kind of and that's actually been a problem for me in the past. I've been in negotiations like with my team before, and I've got people texting me saying, "Hey, act angry," you know. Or like, "Hey, are you angry?" "Yeah, I'm really upset." It's like, "Well, show it then." I'm like, "Okay. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, that's right. I'm mad." Yeah, it's all a game, right? Business is a game. The whole thing is a game, and that's another important life lesson I would say that I've learned along the way. One thing that coming back to your earlier question about what I wish I would have realized much earlier on, and I took it way too seriously. You know, it's a game, and it's all numbers, and you're trying to get the numbers to come to some certain result, right? That is a game.
Yeah.
And then it's a complex one because there's lots of moving parts you don't control, and a lot of people aspects, a lot of emotions involved as well. But once you realize, hey, this is just a game, and how do I, influence, say, all of the factors in this game to get the result that I want, that makes it a lot more fun. Games are fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You also had exposed to worldwide culture very differently,
Yeah.
especially so many countries and
Right.
continent you mentioned.
Yep.
So do you think there's a culture difference as well when, some places or organization or company industry, it's better to show emotion, some places it's better hide?
Yeah, 100%, right?
Yeah.
Like
Give us some
Japan on one extreme versus, I don't know, the Greek or many of the Latin cultures, right, where people are more passionate, right? If you don't show enough passion, then you're not interested, and why is this guy not interested, right? That's very off-putting. Likewise, opposite with the Japanese. If you're, walking into a room all boisterous and emotional, then you're an oddball, and this guy's out of control, right? He should be much more structured and orderly in his communication. So it's absolutely a huge impact, yeah.
Yeah. So before you go into those kind of negotiations, do you kind of mentally prepare yourself? It's like, okay, now the other side of the table is this kind of.
I think, it's a lot more than, say, just mentally, but yeah, mentally preparing yourself is part of it. But for me, a really successful negotiation is you have to have your facts straight, starting with Jimmy's world, right? Really understanding all of the cost drivers, being better prepared than the people on the other side of the table is, to me, quite an obvious basic starting point. But I'm a big believer in game theory type preparation for negotiation and really trying to anticipate all of the different avenues the other side is going to take in that conversation, right? And if I say this and they say that, what am I going to say in return? What are all my counter arguments? And just I love being obsessive about preparing those things. And very few negotiations are one conversation. Many of these, I'm in negotiations now that have been stretching on for more than a year, right? Mm-hmm. When you're buying airplanes and engines and things that cost hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, there are decisions that aren't made lightly, and there's not a lot of options. And there's companies you buy some of these things, you're entering into a minimum 40-year relationship in many cases. So you've got to get it right. So neither side is quick to come to any kind of decision. So it really requires a constant replanning, say, of that negotiation strategy over time.
Yeah, I love those scenario and examples because, we can bring data and facts, right? That's historically whatever has happened. And we probably know our budget, how much spend, and this and that. But a lot of negotiation, especially this long-term relationship type of partnership, you're really negotiating for the future. So, there's shortage of people actually how they react, what they're going to contribute, are they going to align and commit and promise whatever they made upfront to deliver to it. So I'm wondering, the higher stake, I think the more critical the decision is, how much was actually rationale, data, fact-based versus how much was your gut feeling, the relationship, the trust that you feel, because trust that cannot be documented in a way. I mean, trust that you can only feel about it. So how would you balance that? I'm sorry, I'm asking you a lot of hard questions. It's not written here.
But I would be very hesitant to make deals based on my gut feeling alone. Right? That's very risky. I would say, right? So the more clarity that you have on the facts, in terms of cost, in terms of quality, in terms of service, in terms of warranty, all those things.
But what
much
if
better.
they are coming to present it to you equally, but you have to pick one? You could only award this business, whatever that might be, to one versus everybody. How would you choose?
No, first of all, this never happened in 30 years. But anything's possible. It could happen tomorrow, I suppose, but it probably won't. Yeah, I guess to me it would come down to trust. Trust between
How would the
the
people win your
organizations.
trust? How would they win your trust?
I mean, through signing contractual terms that comply with my requirements. Look, I don't want to. The reason your question, for me, that question would never come into play in the real world, is because of a lesson that I learned a very long time ago, in my first job, which was to always ask for more than you expect to receive in a negotiation. I was working on a deal it was one of my first big deals in Rockwell for semiconductors. We were buying all our semiconductors directly from manufacturers, really long lead times, really big quantity. We're making these really high mix of products. So it was a disaster from an inventory and service perspective. So the directive was go make a deal with a distributor, right? When you buy something through a distributor, inherently they're going to put an adder on their cost. It's going to cost more. That was in my mind from the beginning. It's going to cost more. Let's just minimize the amount of adder they put on. And I think I got them down to like 3%. And I thought, man, I did awesome in this. I took it to the CPO. I'm like, here we go, 3% for our semiconductors. It's going to be awesome. It's only going to cost us X millions of dollars more, but we reduce all this inventory. We have better service and more sales growth, right? He kicked me out of his office. He said, no, come back to me when you have zero. I want a 0% markup. Like, that's impossible. They're providing this service. It's stocking, logistics, inventory, re-reeling of parts. I mean, they're never going to go for it. It's like, figure it out. So we figured it out, and we got them down to zero. And for me, I was blown away. I was amazed by the result of my own negotiation, which never would have been possible if I would have asked for something more than I could have expected to receive. And in every single deal I've done since then, I've always done that. I've always said, okay, let's take a step back and make sure that we're not leaving anything on the table, including the table itself, right? I'm going to ask for everything and then some. So it's literally never happened to me where I've gotten everything I've asked for since then.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I don't want to be on the other side
No, you
of
don't.
you then. No. Yeah. Okay, glad that we are on the same side. So let's pivot a little bit in terms of building a high-performing team.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do we do that?
Yeah.
Like, what takes to build a high-performing team? What are some of the things you're trying to build? For example, you started a new organization and doing transformation. What are the critical things for the team to perform?
A couple things. I mean, I mentioned before, it's really important to pick the right people. So how do you do that, right?
Yeah.
And of course, it depends on the situation. But a couple things I learned. I think I just joined ABB. I just moved to Zurich and was building my team there. I didn't have a big team then. It was a few roles before I became CPO. Probably had a dozen people in my organization. Had the team put together, mix of internal and external folks, and then we did like this personality test and training thing as a way of doing team building. And I can't remember the name of it, but it put you in like 65 different quadrants or whatever based on your personality type. And what happened was like 10 out of the 12 people were all in almost the exact same spot on the wheel. And I'm like, oh shit, what have I done? I've just hired a bunch of clones of myself, because I thought, I'm good, so I'm going to hire people like me. I ended up with this team that was completely lacked any diversity of thought because it was a bunch of people that thought like me. Huge mistake, right? That's one thing. Another thing I would say, I take American Airlines. I came in there, procurement was split into like 4 or 5 different parts of the organization, and then there's a bunch of spend that really wasn't being managed at all. It was being managed kind of by the business, right? So put these 4 or 5 teams together, expanded them, added some leadership roles, and added some resources to address the spend that wasn't being managed, right? And you got to be real careful in these things because it wasn't a total disaster. There were some really good people there already. There were some that weren't that great. There were some that people thought weren't great, but actually were good. They just weren't being managed in the right way and led in the right way, right? So I've built a team now that is kind of a mix of people that were there when I got there. Some of them I promoted, right, because they deserve to be promoted and they know the business really, really well. Recruited some people from other departments that know the company well and know how to get things done in the company, right? And then recruited some people from outside, from the airline industry, but mostly not, to bring different perspectives and different ways of thinking and challenge the status quo. And we were very purposeful to do this in a balanced way across all the different category teams so that we have this nice, diversity of thought and like a yin and yang on the old way of doing things and what the company needs versus more, outside the box thinking from aviation perspective to bring, new levels of performance to the table. So having this kind of mix of experience profiles, I guess I would say, is a pretty important success factor in building any kind of team like that.
Yeah, we talked about this morning actually. One of the questions that our TA actually raised was a great one. Is that more difficult to manage up, manage down, or manage sideways? What's in your experience when it comes to transformational opportunities?
That's all hard. I talked about managing up earlier, like getting the alignment of the senior leadership. If you don't have that, you're not going to get very far. That was a big challenge for us in ABB. Managing up was tough. Managing sideways, every bit as important to have the alignment of your peers as it is of your stakeholders. Managing down is somehow easier because you have direct authority. So at the end of the day, if you have to, you can tell people what to do. But also that's not an effective way of leading. People don't want to be told what to do. They want to be able to think and make decisions on their own, right? So creating a culture and enabling that to happen, enabling people to be empowered, kind of being a catalyst instead of a dictator as a leader. As long as you're behaving like that, to me, managing down is relatively easy. I'm a big believer in setting expectations, making sure people have the resources they need to succeed, and then letting them run. And then being the person to support them, remove barriers and that kind of stuff. So then my job becomes more, okay, I'll manage up and I'll manage sideways. You guys do your job and go out there and win.
So you're obviously very accomplished executive. I know you won the award of 2023 CPO, congratulations.
Thank you.
And I'm wondering that who you become today, was there like an early influence in terms of heroes in your life, or the mentors who helped you, or somebody you look up to?
Yeah, there's been a lot along the way, right? So in the late 90s, there was the first CPO of Rockwell was an important mentor of mine. I got the chance to work for him directly early on in building that organization. It really kind of inspired me to do procurement transformation. I really saw, a group of C-suite executives who went from not knowing how to spell procurement to being huge believers in the power of the function. In a couple-year transformation, it really blew me away, actually. These guys didn't know who we were, to suddenly they see us as, not suddenly, but over time, they saw us as a strategic weapon. So that really was motivational for me. And then later in my career, there was the CPO that preceded me in ABB, a gentleman named Daniel Helmig. He was not only a mentor, but also a sponsor. That's also something really important. If you really want to advance your career, mentors will help, but sponsors can make it happen.
Can you tell us the difference?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So Daniel mentored me on how to be a better leader, how to do procurement transformation, practical things. And he told me in one of our first conversations that, hey, eventually you could replace me as CPO. If you do this, you do this, you do this, then you'll be eligible to take over my role. And one of the thises was get an advanced degree. He's a German guy, kind of old school in his thinking. They're all PhDs, and he saw me with a 4-year undergraduate degree. In Germany, it takes 5 years to get an undergraduate degree. So I'm like, okay, I guess I'll look around for a master's program. And I found this very leadership-centric EMBA at IMD that I actually became interested in doing, so I did it, right? But then he gave me job opportunities too. He said, you have to do this job, you have to do that job, and he placed me in those jobs over the course of about 6 years. And then he got promoted, And then he's like, okay, now's the time. It was obvious that that was the next step. So he really sponsored, again, they can make it happen. Mentor can just kind of guide you. Sponsor can decide and put you in the position that you want. Big difference.
Yeah. And so talk about, to wrap up this transformational leadership, if you would put a KPI for a successful transformation, what would that be? Let's say the top 3 items.
Okay, so just the business result has got to be there, whatever it is you're going for, whether it's growth or quality or cost savings, or usually it's some combination of those. But, you know, hardcore business results are indisputable. So that's one.
But who decides that? Whether it's cost, whether it's this, whether it's that.
That's part of the alignment up front with where are we going with this transformation? What result do we want to get out of this, right? In ABB, all they wanted was cost reduction, so we got cost reduction, world-class levels of cost reduction. Mm-hmm. In Schneider, we wanted to improve the quality, we wanted to enable growth, right? So we had other KPIs that were different. They were different. Yep. It depends where you're going, but that's one. In the airline, it's a combination of things. We want, of course, cost, but we also want to improve reliability, right? Who likes delayed flights? Nobody. We want to improve the customer experience, right? Better quality. Yeah, exactly. Don't bother calling me. Better quality catering, better, cleaner airports, cleaner airplanes, et cetera, right? So business results, but also just like the opinions of kind of leadership or customer satisfaction, right? What they really think you contributed to those results, right? Because good results can also just sort of happen due to market conditions or other factors, right? But to what extent the leadership believes that you and your team actually drove that result matters. It matters, I would say.
Yeah. Okay, great.
That's it, those
so,
two things.
Looking back on your career, how has your own emotional intelligence evolved over time?
Yeah, I talked a little bit about this. I used to think that emotion didn't matter. It wasn't a factor in business. Just remove it and, make all decisions based on facts. And when I discovered that's not the case, which really was a moment in time for me, like I was describing, it changed everything. And it made made me a better leader, made me all those things more effective. It was a big boost in my career. But also it just, makes me a happier person, Because I was having all these emotions and stuff before and I was sort of ignoring them. And now when you really sort of embrace them and understand them, and then you start to help other people do the same, it's super rewarding to me. Yeah,
So what advice would you give to aspiring leaders who want to strengthen their emotional intelligence?
Get a good opportunity and don't screw it up. But coming back to it, learn about yourselves first and foremost. Understand who you are, where you came from, why you are who you are, what made you who you are today. Just going on that journey helps you learn how to interpret and understand emotion in different contexts. And then you really need to practice it. I did a lot of exercises in business school with my leadership team on, we go into a meeting and we, take notes about how people are reacting to what's being said in the room, and you discuss it afterwards and really kind of break it down. And do we all interpret this stuff in the same way, right? Really, you got to make it practical. You got to really, like any other big complex problem, you got to break it down into chunks and analyze it, right? And learn. And then the more you do that, the more you're able to do it live. Like right now, I can tell I'm boring many of you. I can see it in your faces. We're getting towards the end of the hour. So I'll just stop talking now.
That's why I'm not looking at them. I'm looking at them. Well, so this actually come to the end of my conversation with you. Thank you very much for answering all the questions. And I would like to open it to the floor. And any question for Dan? How do you find your mentor who is interested in investing in you?
Yeah, I mean, that's a key. You can't just pick somebody random. You can't just say, oh, that's an inspiring person. I'm going to go ask them to be my mentor. They have to be as interested in you as you are in them, right? So how I did it, in the two examples I gave, I guess I gave them a reason to be interested in me, right? When Daniel Helmig came and met me for the first time, I was in Tennessee running the procurement in this company that we had sold to ABB. he was coming for the first visit, and the whole context was, here's this meeting where we're showing the ABB leadership what we do in procurement in Thomas & Betts, the company where I was running procurement. So I took it as a chance to really, I took that presentation more seriously than any other presentation I'd made up to that point in my career. Because I saw this, okay, this is the boss, this is the guy, if I'm gonna grow in this company, he's the one that can make it happen. I never met him, I knew nothing about him, right? Other than like what's in his LinkedIn bio, nothing, right? I just knew I had to blow him away. So I was sure to blow him away with my presentation, to show him all these awesome things that we were doing. And at the end of the meeting, he approached me and said, "Yeah, I want you to come to Zurich, work for me, be my right-hand man, be my head of strategy, and maybe eventually you can have my job," right? So you have to give them a reason to want you to be more successful than you are, and show them that you have potential to do it, right?
How do you choose your battle, given there's so many competing priorities?
Yeah, there's like 1,000 problems that come across your desk every day, and you can only solve so many, right? Also an important, I would say, before I answer the question, part of the answer, important aspect of just being able to sleep at night and being in these big complex jobs is just finding a way to be comfortable going to bed at night with a majority of the issues still open. You know, so I don't know how to advise you to get there mentally on that one, because you need to still stay motivated, drive to solve the problems, right? But it's a question of impact and your ability to tackle those things. So today, what are some of the problems that we're faced? We're faced with tariffs, right? Insane tariffs that are going to just kill the profitability of many companies and many industries, right? So we're not going to solve that in a day. We're not going to solve it in a week or a month. It's going to take years, really, to solve the impacts of those tariffs. But finding comfort, coming back to what Jimmy said on the way up here, finding comfort in this one, the path is just to know that all of our competitors have the exact same challenges. And if we can tackle those challenges just a little bit quicker, a little bit more effectively than everybody else, hey, it's a chance to actually succeed. So I guess getting your head in a space where you're tackling the problems that have the biggest impact on the business first. It just is a practical side of it. But the other side of it is just knowing that those things that are unsolved, if they're equally impacting everybody else in the industry, they shouldn't keep you up at night. And you should be thinking a little bit more long-term about some of those issues.
My 2 cents, sometimes very practical, is if I take this particular action, it will roll the ball to the next person. I would do that first, because I don't want it to be the bottleneck. I don't want people waiting for me. I would rather give this to someone else so they can start working on that and circle back.
And I think that's a really good thought. And to bounce back off of that, as a leader, just making sure that your team is engaged, right? And the problem's not sitting with you as the leader. Yeah. That's also liberating and efficient, you know?
You want to be the one passing the ball. You don't want to be the one stuck with the ball, using sports analogy. Yeah. If you had an assignment for someone but come back, it was a disappointment, how do you manage that? Yeah.
So when I came into Schneider, this was 2019. There was 1,500 people in the organization. In my first 6 months, I met almost all of them face to face, probably 80%. So I had a pretty heavy travel schedule. And I would get them in sessions like this and ask them questions. And we did surveys and stuff that showed the same thing, that everybody hated our digital tools, right? There's too many tools to do their job. They're entering data in multiple systems. None of this stuff is talking to each other. I spend way too much time in front of my screen and on my computer, not enough time with suppliers, with stakeholders. Will you please fix our digital infrastructure? So we embarked on this massive program to revamp the entire digital procurement infrastructure of Schneider Electric over the course of like 3 or 4 years. And after 3 or 4 years, it was totally different. I went back around, I asked the same questions again, and I got the same answers. The same answers. We spent millions and millions of dollars on this, right? And the tools were objectively all much better, but they didn't address the core issue. The core issue was nothing was integrated, they weren't talking to each other. And digital procurement trends today are more in the direction of point solutions, right? Optimize a certain process, not optimize the end-to-end process, because the end-to-end stuff is just not super highly functional. And we're trying to build a world-class, best of the best procurement organizations. We got best in breed and everything. We had just as many tools as we had before. They were a lot better individually, but didn't talk to each other. So a buyer in the course of their day has to deal with all of them. We didn't deal with that core issue. Huge mistake. Huge mistake. 100% on me. 100% on me. What was my solution? Quit my job and go to another company. Not why I left. But the nice thing about that is massive learning, right? So what do I do differently going forward? Totally different approach to the digital procurement infrastructure at American Airlines, I can tell you, based on what I learned in that example.
You have formed a lot of team, you hired a lot of people. The number one thing you're looking for, the number one red tape kind of thing,
Sure.
you're not hire.
So talking about hiring an individual, right? Yeah. I look for people that have been promoted in the companies that they're in, right? And specifically like different departments, different leaders, right? So somebody who is seen in their company today or a company they've worked in before by multiple people in the leadership as a talent, right? That's a good signal to me that this person probably is pretty good, right? If you have multiple promotions in the same company but you had the same boss the whole time, well, you could just be teacher's pet. I'm not sure you're as awesome as maybe your resume makes you appear. So that's one thing I look for. And one thing that's a big red flag for me is changing companies after a very short period of time. 1-2 years here, there, here, there. To me is a pretty big red flag. This person has a hard time establishing themselves in a new company, which is a big risk when you're hiring from the outside.
I actually shared that the red tape, the switching too often, that's a big no for me too. When I was hiring people, my reason is one is switching because it's not stable. Thinking about a company hire a person, they've invested in you, right? It's an investment. So I'm not looking for short-term investment, especially a year or two. That's just too short. And I think for anyone to claim yourself, become like expert, I think it takes years to get there. So I think those quick turnaround is a big no. With the tariff and the big dynamic environment going on, what do you see in 5 years? Are we going to bring manufacturing back here?
Okay, well, first of all, there's still a lot of manufacturing in the U.S. So it's not like it totally left. Will some come back? Sure, probably. Does it need to? I don't think so. Unemployment is 4%. How many of those unemployed people really want to work in factories, doing factory jobs? Probably not that many, So to me, it's totally impractical to look at trade imbalance and translate that into tariff policy. It's kind of ridiculous, and I'm happy to say that to the internet here as well. So I don't think it's going to work. I think also, given that that's the stated purpose of a lot of that, a big reason for that policy. It takes billions and billions of dollars and many years in order to make a pivot like that, and and it's on the whim of one administration that could be gone in 3.5 years. So is it really? Are those really investments that companies are going to be willing to make, or will they find other solutions in the short to midterm? And I think that's more the answer. That's more what's going to happen, is creative solutions being found to deal with the issue.
So balancing the cost and the sustainable supply chain sourcing when it comes to especially catering, the food and beverage.
Mm-hmm. So.
How important is sustainable sourcing in that context?
It's important, for sure. For example, we have the cutlery is no longer plastic, right? It's compostable wood. So we absolutely factor that kind of stuff in. We're in the midst of changing cup suppliers as well. Now that there's tariffs, actually, our strategy might be pivoting a bit. But anytime we have the chance to make a transition, we try to go to something that's more sustainable. So we're going to a recycled plastic cup for the cold beverages, for example, right? So for us, it's not our mission to become the world's most sustainable airline, but we absolutely want to improve our sustainability and our footprint, right? Catering is part of that story. A much bigger topic for airlines is fuel, right? So as the biggest airline in the world, we're actually also the biggest consumer of hydrocarbons in the world as well, which is not a title that we wear proudly. This is a result of the situation, right? So we're trying to work with industry to develop better sustainable aviation fuels at much higher, industry and governments at much higher volumes than what's available today, and hopefully also lower costs, so we can keep the cost of air travel affordable for everyone. I didn't talk about this earlier, but when I was a kid, I came from basic roots. It wasn't a hard scrabble life, but wasn't a luxurious one either. But my parents were able to take me and my sister around the country a little bit, driving trips mainly. I loved traveling. I loved going new places and seeing new things and learning about new cultures and stuff. So when I was 17, so I was between my junior and senior year of high school, I had the chance to actually go to Barcelona, Spain as an exchange student. That's kind of a coincidence that I live there now. It was a different place 35 years ago. It wasn't nearly as nice as it is now. But that really triggered my interest in other cultures, right? And really learning about other cultures. One of my favorite places in the world, by the way, is India. Because in India, you've got not just one country, one culture, right? You've got hundreds. Cultures, languages. Everywhere you go, you walk across the street, it's something totally different than where you were before. That's always fascinated me, and I'll never stop being fascinated by all that stuff. So I think you have to have an interest in it, right? A lot of people ask me, oh, what was it like living in Budapest? I'm like, well, I loved it. One of my favorite places I've ever lived for all these reasons, right? But here's a long list of reasons why it's not for everyone. It's not for everyone. And also every place that we've lived, we've connected with other American expats, and they always fall in one of two camps. They're either trying to figure out how to stay there or stay abroad forever, or they're counting the days till they can return home, And those are the people that I would always avoid because they weren't in it for the experience, the learning, right? Which comes with a lot of positive stuff, but also a lot of super negative things that you got to deal with, right?
So for small companies, we have very limited negotiation powers with our suppliers. And so how do we set us for success?
Yeah, I guess you to differentiate yourselves somehow, right? So it's funny because as I've grown as a procurement leader, I've done more and more selling and less buying, if you will, right? Selling your ideas on how to transform, trying to sell the priorities to the senior leadership, try to sell somebody on coming to take a career opportunity with you as well. But as a small buyer, you're trying to sell your supplier on supplying you, right? Give them a reason, whatever it might be, why you'd be a great customer. Make sure you pay them on time. Basic things like that. Make sure they understand the growth potential that you bring to the table, right? Understand what their motivations are. Why should they do business with you? There should be a good reason, right? Make sure that it's known. So the question was, I was giving an example earlier at ABB when we carved out Hitachi Energy, how the pooling of demand wasn't as important a factor in the supplier relationships as maybe we thought before. So he's asking, why is that? We had convinced ourselves. So these are big commodity categories where volume seems to matter, like copper, steel, aluminum, right? The more of a volume base you have in a producer, the more you can kind of just become the one covering their overhead. We thought we had those kind of deals. Maybe we didn't. Because we decoupled it and cost didn't shoot up, right? The prices didn't shoot up overnight, right? Now, we did do some things to consolidate suppliers. We didn't just take it all apart and separate all the agreements and then leave it be. No, we ran RFPs. We did some other consolidations. But coming to my current situation in American, being the biggest, it does matter. It does mean that we can do things like buy fuel, not from a trader, which we do sometimes, but directly from the refinery, right, at huge volume. And then buy our own pipeline space and our own storage because we have enough volumes to do all of that. And when you eliminate the middleman, you're naturally eliminating some of those costs. It sounds stupid, but actually empowering them, So, and not fake empowering them. And what I mean by that is really letting them do the job, letting them present the results, right? Giving them the credit fully, right? Always at every opportunity. I see two kinds of leaders that are really prominent in the world. One is the expert leader. They're the one that really knows a lot about their subject matter, maybe more than you've ever met, more than anyone else you've ever met, right? But they'll almost never know as much as their whole collective organization, right? The collective knowledge of the team is going to be greater than any one single individual. But that's for me, the most common type of leader is the expert leader, the one who thinks they know everything and they genuinely know almost everything. So they tend to tell people what to do. And they tend to surround themselves with people that like to be told what to do, right? And don't like to be making their own decisions. And I'm not that. I'm the opposite. I try to position myself as a catalyst leader, which is more empowering, I try to surround myself with people that know or that want to make decisions themselves, that want to think for themselves, that have their own ideas about the future, their own vision for their scope and how it can be better and how it can enable the company to succeed. My job is to make sure that's connected to the overall strategy, for sure, right? And to make sure they have the resources they need to excel and to support, enable, coach, mentor, do all those things, and manage to a result and let them figure out how to get there. It's a big shift we're actually doing right now in American Airlines in our own culture because we are command and control. I mean, it's an airline, right? So there's lots of safety specific things. There's rules that are rules and we have to follow them, right? Because the FAA says so, right? And there we don't do empowerment and, you decide, no. These are rules we follow, right? But as a business and as a procurement team, is a great example of that. We don't have to define strict policies. We can define results that we want and empower and enable people to go get them. That's the much more, I would say in the long-term successful way of leading, but also the more rewarding way of leading and being led,
Ouch, that's a hard one. So how do you deal with the leaders who think they know, but actually they don't know how to come up with a strategy solving problem?
So, start with make sure they create their own self-awareness somehow, right? Right? So are you talking about someone who works for me?
No,
Or
like a
okay. You can always vote with your feet, right? Right. That's one way. I've had a lot of bad bosses. Bad bosses is not a fair way of putting it. I've had a lot of unique characters as my direct managers over the course of time, and I would say in aggregate, I've learned a lot from them. Right. But if you have a boss that's incompetent, then you've got a real problem on your hands, and you should deal with that directly. That would be my advice. If you have a boss that maybe just doesn't see the light and you can help them see the light and they'll listen to you and they trust you, then make a go at it, right? What do you have to lose? But if you're working for somebody who's so disconnected from reality, I would seriously consider looking at other opportunities. When you pick your job, you're not just picking your job, you're picking your boss too, right? And for me, it's an important one that is hard to get right, unless you really, but if it's somebody that's working in your company today and you've worked with them for many years, you know them, that's one thing. But like me, when I jump to a different company, that's the biggest risk that I take is this guy or gal really who they appear to be, through the interview process? Because it's a two-way street when you're doing a job interview. Just make sure you make a good choice, as good as you possibly can, and you really vet your boss, just like they are vetting you when you're looking for a new opportunity.
For those of you, if you're stuck in your job, sometimes you do, for a period of time. Now, if you do stuck with your job, I would say try to take a step back because you have already made your opinion in terms of your boss, right? Work on how do you gain trust. Because when there's no trust, nothing can get through. Trust is a foundation. If you're stuck for good reasons, I guess that would be an angle I would try to gain trust first, and then try to give some suggestion, because trust will win the person over to open-minded and maybe be more willing to listen.
I love this question. Hostage at the table, George Kohlreiser. Anybody know it? I saw one head nodding. So, do you know it? Yeah.
I think I listened to an audiobook or something.
Yeah, Emotional Intelligence. It's written by a guy who he did hostage negotiations, and now he's a professor at the business school that I went to. Amazing book in terms of emotional intelligence. Very relatable and very directly transferable to business. I always go back to that. Anytime I'm trying to teach somebody in my team about managing with emotions, I steer them to that book.
So in addition to hiring the right people, putting the KPI for the team, when you start building a team from scratch, what are unique touch from you to make that success?
So I've talked about some of this, right? Diversity of experience, people coming from different types of backgrounds and different perspectives to bring a complete picture to the table. I look for people that can grow as well, right? So not just hiring for the role, but hiring for the company, hiring at least for the team. What's this person going to do after they come into the organization? Once the people are there, to make sure there's a good way of developing everything forward. So a good example, in American, I described how I put the team together, and it's kind of a mix of non-procurement people from inside the company, procurement people from inside, procurement people from outside. And they're all different levels of capability and competence in terms of the basic procurement competencies of contract management, negotiation, cost management, et cetera. So I want to get a level set of, let's get everybody at least to a certain bar, right? So we're going through a process. There's a third party that I hired to come and give everybody a test. And it's not a test to give you a score and see how good you are. It's a test to figure out which competencies do you need to work on. And then from that comes a development plan, which has a bunch of e-learnings, some coaching, some on-the-job stuff, a mix of learning opportunities to develop the competencies. Try to get everybody so I know, okay, now everyone's kind of at the same level. Because even the people in the company that have been doing procurement for a long time, they haven't had proper procurement leadership. They haven't had training classes. I did a negotiation training last year with everybody in the team, and they hadn't done that ever, right? So Jimmy's over here licking his chops and putting a proposal together for aim and drive as I'm speaking. But yeah, that'd be the last piece, is make sure that there's a good growth plan for those people in terms of their development, but then also a good talent management process around that as well. So who's ready for promotion now? What job do they go into? What development needs do these high potential people have? And how do we make sure we bring them those development opportunities so they can continue to grow in the roles and stay interested in the roles that they're in today until it's time for them to move to the next thing? It's a living, breathing thing. You know, building a team is not a one-off activity. It's constantly happening. You know, as a leader, it's the most important thing that you do is to make sure that you have the best people around, the best people in your team, and that they're motivated to win and succeed every single day. Because when that's happening, the problem comes, to your point, is I don't want to keep it on my plate. You just steer it to the right person in your team who's motivated and capable to solve it. It makes your life a joy.
Yeah, that's wonderful, and that's a very strong, ending to the session. So Dan, I would like to thank you for sharing your time, your insight, and your experience with us today. You have helped us to better understand emotional intelligence, and especially in the context of transformational leadership. This is super helpful. And for those of you in the room, that I encourage you to take a moment to think, what's one insight you want to carry forward in your leadership journey from this conversation? And what's one emotional intelligence trait you wanted to strengthen? And starting doing that today. So Dan, I was truly grateful, and thank you very much for joining us. And to everyone who will be listening, thank you for being part of this conversation. And I hope this conversation helped you to create a space for reflection, learning, and growth. Thank you again, Dan.
Thank you, Helen.